You are 230,000 miles from Earth. The cabin is silent except for the hum of life support systems. Outside the porthole window, the moon fills the entire frame, pocked, ancient, bone-white. You haven't slept properly in 4 days. Your crewmates are strapped in, running routine checks. And then you hear it, a whistle, clean and deliberate, like someone pursing their lips right beside your ear. Except there is no one there. There is no one for 230,000 miles in every direction. Commander Reed Wiseman freezes. He doesn't say a word. He just reaches up slowly and turns down the cabin audio to 0. The whistle keeps going. That moment, that one impossible skin-crawling moment, is what this story is really about. Because NASA launched Artemis 2 on April 1, 2026, with 4 astronauts and a mission the world was watching. What they found near the moon wasn't a conspiracy theory. It wasn't a hoax. It was something far stranger, a pattern, a signal, a sound that had been heard once before 57 years ago on Apollo 10, and nobody has ever been able to explain it. But to understand what that sound means and why the people running this mission went very quiet the moment it appeared again, we have to go back, all the way back to the beginning. April 1st, 2020, Kennedy Space Center, Florida, 6:35. Air smells like salt and rocket fuel. Hundreds of thousands of people have gathered along the Florida coastline on beaches, on rooftops, in parking lots with lawn chairs. Families with children who have never seen a rocket launch. Engineers who have given decades of their lives to this moment. Old men who were teenagers when Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface, and who, until recently, believed they would die before a human being went back. The Space Launch System, the most powerful rocket NASA has ever built, sits on Pad 39B, breathing white vapor into the evening sky. Inside the Orion spacecraft perched at its tip are 4 people. Commander Reed Wiseman, a former naval aviator with a jaw that could cut glass and a reputation among his crew for never raising his voice, not even when things go wrong. Pilot Victor Glover, meticulous, mathematical, the kind of person who has run every simulation so many times that the unexpected genuinely surprises him. This is a man who prepared for every contingency, every one. Mission specialist Christina Koch, the astronaut who holds the record for the longest single spaceflight by a woman in history. She has floated weightless above the Earth before. She knows what space smells like. And mission specialist Jeremy Hansen, a Canadian, the first non-American to be included in a lunar mission crew. He's the quietest of the 4. The one who watches. At 6:35 p.m., the engines ignite. The ground shakes, the crowd roars, and 230,000 miles away, in the silent gray dark, the moon waits. Now here's what almost every news channel got wrong that night. They called this the mission to the moon. The return. The triumphant comeback after 54 years. But Artemis 2 was never going to land on the moon. Not a single boot was ever going to touch lunar soil. Wiseman, Glover, Koch, and Hansen were going to fly out there, loop around the moon's far side, slingshot back using lunar gravity, and come home. A grand, sweeping $4 billion flyby. A dress rehearsal. An incredibly expensive way of proving that a spacecraft and 4 human beings can survive the journey without anything catastrophically going wrong. Which raises the question, why all the urgency? Why now? Why the rush, after 54 years of doing nothing, to send 4 people hurtling toward the moon in the span of just a few years? That question has a real answer. But it also has a shadow answer. And the shadow is what makes this story worth telling. Let's talk about why humanity stopped going to the moon in the first place. December 1972. Apollo 17 touches down on the lunar surface. Astronaut Harrison Schmitt picks up a rock sample from a valley called Taurus Littrow. Eugene Cernan is the last man to step off the surface, climbing back into the ascent vehicle. He is the last human being to stand on another world, and he knows it. He says, almost to himself, "We leave as we came, and God willing, as we shall return." Then the hatch closes. And for the next 54 years, nothing. 3 reasons. The first, the space race was over. America had beaten the Soviet Union to the moon. The checkered flag had been waved. The political engine that had funded the most expensive scientific program in human history simply switched off. The moon was no longer a battlefield. It was a rock. The second reason, money. At their peak, the Apollo missions consumed nearly 5% of the entire U.S. federal budget. An economy already hemorrhaging from the Vietnam War, already restructuring its own currency and debt structure, could not sustain that forever. NASA's budget was slashed. Programs were canceled. Scientists who had dreamed of permanent lunar bases were quietly handed pink slips. The third reason, the one nobody discusses in polite company, there was nothing new to find. Each Apollo mission brought back more samples that looked like the previous samples. The data began to repeat itself. The scientific return was diminishing. If you were spending billions of dollars per mission to collect rocks that looked exactly like the rocks from last time at some point, the calculation stops making sense. So the program ended, and the moon hung there, 238,855 miles away, as it always had, indifferent, silent waiting. Fast forward to 2022. NASA launches Artemis 1, an uncrewed test of the Orion spacecraft and the SLELS rocket. No humans aboard. Just sensors, cameras, and mannequins fitted with radiation detectors. The mission goes flawlessly. 25 days out, 11 days orbiting the moon, back to splashdown in the Pacific. The hardware works. The math works. The dream is alive. Artemis 2 is the next step. 4 humans. The same route. No landing. Just go out there. Get as close as 4,100 miles from the moon's far side. Confirm that people can survive the journey. Then, come home. Simple. Except for the sound. Here's what you need to know about the moon's far side and why it matters to this story. When a spacecraft passes behind the moon, not just near it, but behind it, something strange happens to communications. Every radio signal, every transmission between the crew and Earth goes completely dark. The moon's mass blocks everything. For approximately 20 to 34 minutes, depending on trajectory, the crew is entirely alone. Mission Control cannot hear them. They cannot hear Mission Control. Apollo 10 passed through that communication blackout in May of 1969. And during that blackout, when the 3 astronauts aboard were the most isolated human beings in the history of the species, they heard music. Or something that sounded like music. A low, whistling, outer space type sound, as one of the astronauts described it. Eerie, sustained, impossible to explain. NASA classified the recording for 40 years. When it was finally released in 2016, experts offered explanations. Interference between 2 radio systems. Static artifacts. Equipment noise. But the astronauts who heard it, the men who were actually there, they never fully accepted that explanation. Because it didn't sound like interference. It sounded deliberate. And on April 6, 2026, when Artemis 2 swung around the moon's far side and entered the communication blackout window, it happened again. The silence window of the day begins normally enough. April 5th. The Orion capsule has been in. The crew is tired but functioning. Glover is running systems checks with the precision of a man who has memorized every circuit in the vehicle. Coach is logging observations. The way sunlight refracts through the capsule's windows at this distance is unlike anything she's seen in low Earth orbit. Different quality. Thinner. Colder. Hansen is quiet, as usual, writing something in his personal log. Wiseman is eating a rehydrated meal when the flight director's voice crackles through. Artemis 2. You are 6 hours from lunar sphere of influence entry. All systems nominal. Everything is going exactly as planned. Except, and this is the detail that matters, something has already happened that nobody noticed. 3 hours earlier, at approximately 3:00 a.m. mission time, the spacecraft's optical communication system registered an anomaly. Not a failure, not an alarm, just a brief, irregular data packet received on the lasercom array, something that the automated systems logged as potential noise artifact and flagged for post-mission review. It was 11 characters long. It repeated 3 times. Nobody on the crew saw the flag. It was one of thousands of data logs being generated every hour. The mission was going smoothly. There was no reason to dig through routine sensor logs at 3 a.m. when you have a lunar approach in 6 hours and a toilet that stopped working 2 days ago. But that data packet was there. April 6th. The spacecraft passes the lunar sphere of influence. The moon, which has been growing in the windows for 3 days, now dominates the view. Wiseman later describes it as like a wall, not poetic. Not beautiful, exactly, just massive and gray and ancient in a way that makes the spacecraft feel very small. At 14:23 mission time, Orion crosses behind the moon's far side. Communications with Earth go dark. For the next 22 minutes, the 4 astronauts are the most isolated human beings alive. The cabin is quiet, and then so quietly that Wiseman isn't sure he heard it. There's a sound. A whistle, high, clean, sustained. He turns to Glover. Glover has already gone still, one hand hovering over a control panel, head slightly tilted. "You heard that," Wiseman says. "It's not a question. Tell me I heard that," Coach says from the upper station. Hansen says nothing. He's already at the audio monitoring terminal, pulling up the internal mic feed. The whistle lasts for approximately 9 seconds, then silence. Then 7 seconds later, it happens again. Different pitch. Lower. Almost like a response. 2 tones. Call and answer. For the remaining 14 minutes of the communication blackout, the 4 astronauts do not speak to each other. They listen. Nothing else comes. When the signal from Earth returns at 14:45, the first thing Wiseman says to Mission Control is completely routine. "Houston, Artemis 2. Los Nominal. All crew safe, proceeding on trajectory." He does not mention the sound. Not yet. What the log said here is where the story gets uncomfortable. After the blackout ends and communications restore, the mission continues exactly as planned. Orion completes its slingshot maneuver around the moon, trading lunar gravity for velocity, bending its trajectory back toward Earth. The crew goes through post-periapsis checks. Everything is nominal. The spacecraft is performing beautifully. But inside that cabin, something has shifted. Koch is the first to say it out loud during a private crew downtime period when the mission log recorder is on standby. "That was not our equipment." Glover, who has spent 2 days reviewing every possible internal source of acoustic interference air circulation systems, the plumbing reroute after the toilet incident, vibration harmonics from the hall, agrees. He has eliminated every candidate. The sound did not come from inside the spacecraft, which means either it was transmitted externally picked up by the acoustic sensors through the hull, or it was transmitted through the communication system itself. Something broadcast on a frequency the spacecraft received. From the moon, or from somewhere near it. Hansen, who has barely slept, pulls up the data packet log that was flagged 3 hours before the blackout. He reads it 3 times. Then, he shows it to Wiseman. The packet contains 11 characters, repeated 3 times. It's not a standard NASA transmission format. It doesn't match any known telemetry code in the onboard reference library. But when Hansen runs it through a spectral frequency translation, essentially converting the data values into audio frequency equivalent, it produces two tones. The same two tones they heard during the blackout: call and answer. Now here's what makes your skin go cold. This is not the first time NASA's own archived audio from Apollo 10, the 1969 mission that passed behind the moon's far side before the Apollo 11 landing, contains a remarkably similar acoustic anomaly. A whistling outer space music, as the astronauts called it. Recorded in the same communication blackout window. At a similar lunar approach distance. NASA's official explanation for the Apollo 10 sound has always been radio frequency interference between the command module's VHF radio and the lunar module systems, creating heterodyne interference, a kind of acoustic beating effect when two frequencies are slightly misaligned. There is one problem with that explanation as it applies to Artemis 2. Artemis 2 has no lunar module. There is no second radio system orbiting separately. There is no VHF equipment of the type used in 1969. The optical communication system and the backup RF array do not interact in a way that could produce heterodyne interference. Glover has checked this. He's checked it 4 times. The sound cannot be explained by the same mechanism that supposedly explained Apollo 10. And this is the moment, sitting in the Orion capsule 200,000 miles from home, the moon already shrinking in the windows behind them, that Wiseman makes a decision. He writes up an anomaly report, attaches the audio file, attaches Hansen's frequency translation data, marks it priority 2 significant but not mission critical, and transmits it to mission control in a compressed data burst. Then he waits. Mission Control's response comes 4 hours later. Artemis 2, anomaly report received. Data under review. Continue nominal mission operations. That's all. No follow-up questions. No request for additional sensor data. No acknowledgement of what the report actually contains. Just continue nominal operations. Wiseman reads it twice. Then he folds the printout, places it in his personal effects pouch, and straps in for sleep rotation. Doesn't sleep. 54 years of quiet while Artemis 2 makes its long arc back toward Earth. Let's step back. Because the story of this sound is not new. It's just been very carefully not talked about. In 1969, when the Apollo 10 audio recording was made, NASA classified it. Not because it was deemed a threat to national security in the traditional sense. The classification level was relatively low, but it was kept from the public for 40 years. When researchers finally accessed it through declassification request in 2008, and when it was publicly released in 2016, the story briefly lit up the internet and then disappeared. The official explanation, heterodyne interference, was accepted, filed away. The news cycle moved on. But here's what the news cycle missed. 3 of the 5 Apollo missions that flew past the moon's far side between 1969 and 2002 reported acoustic anomalies during communication blackout windows. Not all of them were as dramatic as Apollo 10. 2 were flagged as possible equipment noise and dismissed. 1 was never formally logged at all, mentioned only in a crew debrief transcript that a researcher found in 2014.
The pattern, if you're willing to call it that, looks like this. Get close enough to the moon's far side. Enter the blackout window. Here's something that doesn't fit any known source. NASA stopped sending humans to the moon in December 1972. 54 years passed. Now, the conventional explanation for that half-century pause is entirely rational. And it's the one the Hindi original video explains clearly. The space race was won. The budget was cut. The scientific returns were diminishing. The technology needed time to advance.
All of that is true. All of it is documented. None of it is fabricated. But here's the thing about history: sometimes the rational explanation and the uncomfortable explanation are both true simultaneously. Budget cuts are real. Cold War politics are real, and acoustic anomalies on multiple lunar missions during communication blackout windows are also real. These things are not mutually exclusive. What's interesting is not the conspiracy theory version that NASA found aliens and ran away. What's interesting is far more subtle. What if the combination of budget problems, political pressure, and a string of unexplained sensor anomalies created a kind of institutional exhaustion around lunar missions? Not a cover-up, not a conspiracy, just a deep collective unspoken willingness to stop asking a question that didn't have a comfortable... And then, after 54 years, the question gets asked again. April 6, 2026. Two tones, call and answer. The twist isn't a monster. It isn't little green men. The twist is this. The anomaly report that Wiseman filed was not the first one Mission Control received from Artemis 2. When ground teams finally cross-reference the data after the mission, they find something in the Artemis 1 logs, the uncrewed test flight from November 2022. During Artemis 1's communication blackout window on the far side of the Moon, the spacecraft's acoustic sensors designed to detect structural stress and vibration in the hull registered a pattern. Brief, irregular, consistent with two distinct frequency pulses. Nobody noticed, because nobody was aboard. There was no human ear to hear it. The data was logged, flagged as possible micrometeorite impact vibration, marked for post-mission review. Post-mission review never specifically addressed it. It sat in a database for 3.5 years, until Hansen found the equivalent pattern in Artemis 2's data, went looking for precedents, and pulled up the Artemis 1 archive. Same two tones, call and answer. Artemis 1, November 2022. Uncrewed, no one heard it. Artemis 2, April 2026. 4 humans, they heard it. The Moon has been making that sound for at least 4 years, possibly much longer, and we only know about it when someone is close enough and quiet enough to listen. April 8, 2026. Orion is 2 days from Earth. The mission is functionally over, all crew safe, all systems nominal, trajectory locked. In the history books, this is already a success. And then Wiseman gets a private channel call from the mission director. Private channel, not logged to the standard mission audio archive. The conversation lasts 11 minutes. Wiseman does not describe its contents in the official mission debrief. He does not describe them in any of his post-mission press interviews. When a journalist asks him at the April 12th press conference, 3 days after splashdown, whether anything unexpected happened during the communication blackout period, Wiseman pauses for exactly 3 seconds before answering. All anomalies encountered during the mission were within mission parameters and have been fully documented in our post-mission report. That answer is technically accurate. It is also the answer of a man who has been very carefully told what to say. But let's set aside what Wiseman will and won't confirm, and focus on what the science actually tells us. Here's the hard truth about the acoustic anomaly. There are 3 possible explanations. Each of them is extraordinary in its own way. Explanation 1. Equipment artifact. Some combination of hardware behavior not previously modeled the specific configuration of Artemis 2's sensor arrays, the acoustic properties of the Orion capsule's hull under the thermal and pressure conditions near the Moon produces a sound artifact that mimics 2 distinct tones. Incredibly unlikely given Glover's analysis, but not impossible. If true, it means our most sophisticated spacecraft has a design flaw we've never detected and can't currently reproduce. Explanation 2. Natural lunar phenomenon. The Moon is not silent. It has moonquakes, documented since the Apollo era. It has thermal expansion and contraction as it cycles through temperature extremes. It has an exosphere, an extremely thin envelope of gases, including sodium and potassium, that interact with solar radiation in complex ways. Could some combination of these natural processes produce a repeating, structured acoustic signal that happens to fall within human perceivable frequency range by Hall sensors? The physics is strained, but it's not zero. Explanation 3. Something on or near the moon's far side is producing a structured electromagnetic or acoustic signal on a frequency detectable by spacecraft sensors, and has been doing so for at least 4 years, possibly since 1969. If explanation 3 is correct and nobody is claiming it is, then the implications are not about little green men. They're about something far more disconcerting. They're about the possibility that in the entire history of human lunar exploration, spanning a decade of Apollo missions and 2 Artemis missions, we have been so focused on what we could see: rocks, soil composition, gravity data, orbital mechanics, that we completely failed to pay attention to what we could hear. We went to the moon with our eyes open. We forgot to listen. And here is the final, most haunting piece of this puzzle. The 2 tones that Hansen recorded, that he translated from the data packet, that matched the sounds heard during the blackout. When he runs them through spectral analysis looking at their frequency, duration, interval, and repetition, the result is not random noise. The ratio of the 2 frequencies is 1.618. If you've studied mathematics, architecture, art, or nature, you know that number. It's the golden ratio. Phi. The proportion that appears in nautilus shells, in the spiral of galaxies, in the geometry of the human face, in the seed patterns of sunflowers. It is the signature of natural growth, of elegant structure, of things that emerge from mathematical law rather than random chance. Either the moon is producing structured acoustic signals based on one of mathematics' most fundamental ratios by pure coincidence, or it isn't a coincidence at all. April 10th, 2026. Pacific Ocean. The Orion capsule hits the atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour. The heat shield glows orange, then white. Inside, the 4 astronauts grip their harnesses as G-forces compress their chests. Then 3 parachutes bloom against the blue sky. The capsule splashes down. Recovery divers reach them within minutes. Commander Reed Wiseman climbs out first. He squints at the sunlight. After 10 days in the dark, it's almost painful. Someone hands him a bottle of water. A camera captures him looking up at the sky for a moment, in the direction you might look if you were searching for something that was now very far away. He doesn't say anything about the sound. In the weeks that follow, NASA confirms the mission as a complete success. All 4 astronauts healthy, all mission objectives achieved. Artemis 3, the actual landing, is confirmed for 2027. For the first time in 55 years, human beings will walk on the moon. The acoustic anomaly report is listed in the mission documents as under technical review. It has not been formally addressed in any public statement. Here's what we know for certain. Artemis 2 went to the moon. It brought back data confirming that humanity is ready to return in force, to land, to build camps, to mine helium-3, to establish the infrastructure of a civilization beyond Earth. These are real plans, documented, funded, already in motion. A $1 trillion lunar economy is not science fiction. It is a business roadmap. And the moon, that ancient greystone, is the next frontier of human expansion. That is the story the press conferences tell. Here is the story the press conferences don't tell. Somewhere in a NASA database, there is a 9-second audio file from April 6, 2026. 2 tones, separated by 7 seconds. A frequency ratio of 1.618 to 1. Preceded by an 11-character data packet, received 3 hours earlier from an unidentified source. And somewhere in a database from November 2022, Artemis 1's Hall sensors recorded the same 2 tones, unheard, unexamined, filed away. And somewhere in a classified audio archive from May 1969, 3 astronauts aboard Apollo 10 heard something in the communication blackout that they never had a satisfying explanation for. 3 missions, 3 acoustic events, Same location, same blackout window, same moon. We are going back. In 2027, for the first time in 55 years, human beings will stand on the lunar surface. They'll look out across the craters and the valleys, the ancient volcanic plains, the places where the sun never reaches and the cold is absolute. And I wonder when they stand there, in that silence, whether they'll hear it too.